Welcome to Cognitive Connections, where we're dedicated to helping you preserve and strengthen brain health at every stage of life. I'm Nandita Srikumar, the president and founder of Cognitive Connections. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide medical advice or diagnosis. Today, we have the founder and the director of the Lifelong Learning of Virtual Brain Health Center with us. Dr. Krystal L. Cullers, a doctor of behavioral health and master of arts, is the founder of the Virtual Brain Health Center. And she's currently on a mission to revolutionize brain care for everyone. As a doctor of behavioral health and a holistic brain health expert, she brings nearly 2 decades of unparalleled expertise in working with individuals, families, providers, and advocacy organizations, specializing in brain-related diagnosis. With her groundbreaking work in translational and applied brain health science, she has garnered a collection of prestigious international and national awards. LeAnne Stuver, who holds a Master of Education and Bachelor of Science in Nursing, is the Director of Lifelong Learning at the Virtual Brain Health Center. A registered nurse with a decade of hospital and home care experience, she is also an experienced healthcare educator dedicated to revolutionizing the way we approach health education. With over 25 years of expertise in the planning and implementation of adult education curricula, she has enlightened countless individuals through her diverse range of educational programs. Passionate about empowering individuals and communities, she strives to teach practical methods for supporting brain health and overall wellness. Dr. Cullers and Ms. Stuver, I'm so excited to have you here on the Cognitive Connections podcast.
Thank you for having us. I'm excited to see where the conversation is going to take us today.
Yeah. So could you tell us a little bit more about the mission, the journey, and the inspiration behind launching the Virtual Brain Health Center?
Sure, I'll try my best. So LeAnne and I became friends and colleagues in a brick and mortar type of center up in Northeast Ohio in Cleveland. And we both had moved on, but always stayed connected after that job change. And what happened when early in the pandemic, when we saw what was happening, I called her and I thought, how can we help? How could we take what we knew about programs and services? We knew what that meant for the implications of older adults and caregivers' brains at the onset of COVID and the lockdowns. We knew what the long-term consequences could be based on the science we had studied and shared with adults for quite a while. And we simply wanted to help. And so I called her one day and threw out the idea of, what about a virtual brain health center? And luckily, LeAnne's like, that's a great idea. And she's been my partner in crime ever since. But it was really just this idea of wanting to create a virtual space where people could connect, learn about brain health science, ask their questions to the experts in real time, and then find additional resources. And we kind of stretched very broad on different aspects of brain health, which I'm sure we'll get into later. But we're very surprised to have an international reach within our first 2 years. And so it was really initially a crazy idea. And now 4 years later, we're committed to growing and finding scalable and sustainable solutions to educate people about brain health.
That's absolutely amazing. I think really having a virtual brain health center is really crucial for everyone because, it's education that everybody can access through, the click of a button on their laptop. So I think that's really great that both of you guys started that. So can you also explain a little bit why maintaining brain health wellness is really crucial to everyone?
No, I think when LeAnne and I first started in our working together, even LeAnne was studying more of the lifelong learning science before I came on doing brain health. It was always this idea that brain health was for people that didn't have a brain health diagnosis or brain related diagnosis, not neurodegenerative disease, not a mental health condition. And I thought, well, then who's left? Because that's not me or anyone in my immediate family would be able to sit there and say they're not managing chronic health, mental health, or brain-based disease. And so a lot of the conversation has really changed now, thankfully, which I think through the work that you're really advocating to do as well, is to invite everyone into the conversation on brain health. Because if we look at just neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's disease, we see changes happening in the brain 2 decades before. People are becoming symptomatic. The shifts in healthcare are really starting to show preventative health. We want people, before they have a chronic health condition to be getting screened and worrying. And so LeAnne and I were a little bit ahead of the curve. We always wanted everyone talking about brain health. And so now we get to really have, I think, a lot more open conversations with people who are also interested in recognizing we should talk about brain health to kids. We should talk about brain health in the workplace or in school environments. This is a conversation for all of us and not just one to have when we're noticing something's a little off in ourselves or our loved ones. It's one to just be having, I think, on a normal weekend like we are now, just to say, how are you taking care of your brain? And that's a normal part of the chat. So that's really where we've been striving to carry those conversations forward and welcoming everyone in that we all should be caring for our brain. But that's a big shift from a lot of the health messaging we've had in previous decades.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's kind of what Cognitive Connections also is striving for currently. Make sure to include everyone in the conversation. I think that's a really crucial aspect of how we're going to move forward as a community altogether. So your platform with Virtual Brain Health Center offers a lot of virtual brain care services. So how do these virtual services really compare to traditional in-person care when it comes to supporting overall brain health?
That's a really great question in this time of so many things being provided online, which really was a benefit to us. I mean, we started it because of the COVID lockdowns, but in a way, COVID helped promote the Virtual Brain Health Center because so many things went virtual. People were more comfortable using the virtual platform. And now that things have opened back up, there's still a need for virtual programming, virtual telehealth, all these things that are remaining to help people, because what we like to do is meet people where they are. And we do in-person programs if somebody asks us or sponsors a program. But really our bread and butter is these virtual programs. But to be honest with you, when we sit down to develop a program, we develop a topical program. We don't develop it for virtual or for in-person. The information and the way we present it is the same, whether it's in person or whether it's virtual. The difference is we're just able to meet people where they are. If it's a group in person, great. Maybe it's a group virtual, or maybe it's a bunch of individuals. Whatever the case may be, we are flexible to meet them. And I think the difference is that there is no difference. Our message and our program is the same, no matter where the program is delivered. And that's not always the case with everybody, but it is with us. We're pretty true to our message, regardless of how or where it is received.
That's great. The option of being flexible, I think that's very important to any kind of organization. So for you to be able to shift between both virtual and also going back to in person, I think that just allows a larger audience to be able to, that you can be able to reach, and also a larger audience that, we can impact as a group.
Definitely.
So could you also walk us through one of your typical virtual programs that you guys host?
Sure. We have a couple of different formats. If anyone goes to our website, our regular routine programs that we offer free of charge are a chair yoga program and a gentle yoga program. And those each occur twice a month. And those are a shorter, about 30 minutes, an introduction from the instructor, about a 25-minute easy workout, and a conclusion. So that's our shorter program. When we post or host during any of our special event weeks, a more lecture-based program, it's still not a whole lot different. We do an introduction of the speaker and the topic. We have a PowerPoint slide deck that we usually share, unless it's more of an interview format. And then we always make sure that at the end of that 30 to 45-minute lecture component, that we leave time for Q&A at the end, so that if anything was unclear or if we need to revisit any of the slides, that we can do that. And that also provides that social connection piece that we feel is also important, even though it's in the virtual format, whether it's asking questions in the chat or actually unmuting and asking the question live during the class. So that's another area where we're flexible. We can answer questions in either of those formats comfortably. But that's kind of the typical how our classes are structured.
That's kind of nice that you guys have like two different kinds of programs, allowing, your audience and all the people that are reaching out to the Virtual Brain Health Center to kind of pick and choose whatever like fits with their schedule. So I think that's really amazing. And the idea of also including the social connection piece, I think that's really crucial for us to like improve our brain health, because social connection is something that our brain essentially needs. So even if it's virtual, kind of including that piece is really key. So that's amazing. So also, Virtual Brain Health Center really emphasizes translating the latest science into actionable steps. So can you share some examples how recent research in brain health has influenced your guys' program?
I'm really thankful you've asked this question, because I think one we hear about a lot is the science on brain health is changing a lot of the time. It is updating, it's in real time now as we're having this conversation. And so we're always looking for other experts that can share their insights. So much like to the conversation we're having with you today, we invite them onto our podcast to say, tell us about this latest research study. What are its implications for us? When it comes to the programs we do, as LeAnne just walked us through with our community, a lot of the times through our signups, we have people tell us what are the topics that are on their mind. So, those of us here, we're probably reading some journal articles or following that, but it's different from what an average person might be getting in their typical media resources, whether that's on social media, what they're reading in magazines, what are their friends and social networks talking about when they're out and about. And so we use a lot of different ways to pull in what has people's interest now and really trying to respond to that in real time. And the way we do some of that too is if people visit our website, we build a searchable resource directory, because, we make all these wonderful connections, or we know, hey, this is an expert I could send you to on health, brain health coaching or nutrition, but people want to go and search and find the expert themselves and reach out. So we try to look at some of that tech space of what can we build and make it functional for the way people are using us to source information. And we have one that's coming out that is 28 days to build a better brain. And since the science is always changing, it will let us link to a more recent article that someone could go to read about, like the implications of air pollution. And brain health has been covered a lot more recently in the media, but to let them know, there are these other aspects of brain health that might not be on some of the research list of the, main 12, 14 factors you want to recognize, but where they can go get some additional reliable information. And that makes it manageable for the two of us to say, okay, these are the top topics. Let's make sure we have an audio type resource, something people could read, or an expert they can be directed to.
That's great. I think giving those, different options again, I think options is what really motivates people to go with, especially brain health. It's not a topic that a lot of people even like to touch upon. So I think when you give them, audio, a video, a book, and even classes, it just gives them so many more options and allows them to be flexible with their schedule. And also covering topics that they're interested about is a really key way to keep them engaged. So I think that's amazing. So how do you ensure that the science shared through the Virtual Brain Health Center is accessible and easy to understand for all people of all backgrounds?
Now, this is a great question. I would think it's something LeAnne and I have learned through some of the experiences that we have. And I can share an example with you. We were approached a while back to help a school understand, like, what would brain health look like if we're talking cognitive fitness for kindergarten versus someone in high school or middle school. And, we always thought, well, these are topics we talk about too with adults. We're talking working age adults, or even we've translated that to what does cognitive fitness look like for someone in their senior years or someone that's living in long-term care. And so we quickly learned the messaging is the same. We went to the research, we looked through to see, is there science that shows that it's different if we're talking nutrition? It's typically the same global recommendations for nutrition or how to move Sleep might depend on the hours where you're at developmentally, but the core concepts are the same. And so we really started to figure that out of how do we meet each audience where their needs might be. And luckily, I think that was one of the things LeAnne mentioned earlier was because we were virtual, a lot of the accessibility components where we would have had to pay to have language translation or closed captions a few years ago are now all built in on the lovely platform we're on today, like Zoom. There's so many features that have made things that would have been more cost prohibitive years ago to do types of programs that we do where we would need more underwriting and grant funding or sponsors to really just say, okay, we can get on Zoom, we can do our program in English. And I think last year in Brain Week alone, we had people report that they spoke over 70 different languages. And we do our programs in English, so we're very aware of that. But, we started to then ask our community, what are the languages they're speaking at home? What are the topics of concern? And trying to make sure we can find some tech that helps mirror how people are finding us and our impact across the world is really amazing. It's not what we set out to do, but having that global footprint, being a little more mindful too of some examples we can share that aren't just, centric to if we're talking Ohio and we're going to think about vitamin D deficiencies. That's a great example, but now we're all across the world. So to make sure we can pull from different cultures and backgrounds, or to even acknowledge that sometimes there's not terminology to speak about the same things we are around brain health, or to acknowledge, like you said earlier, this hesitancy. Brain health sounds exciting to a lot of other people, but in some countries, it's still the stigma that we're going to talk about things related to our brain or how our brain is performing. And we still have that stigma here in the US as well. So I think that's really the best things that we can try to do is we lean on our audience and our members and the feedback they're giving, and also the technology to find, what are some low-cost ways where we can still support engagement for people.
Yeah, I think the shift to virtual has just been so beneficial for a lot of organizations. And I think you just really highlighted that with what you just said. And I think, like addressing different age groups, kind of what you said with the kids, the teens, and the seniors. I think, being part of Cognitive Connections myself, I think I've also realized, it's essentially the same content, but how you present it, slightly different to each audience is kind of just what makes each audience engaged in a different way. So I think that's great. So also the Virtual Brain Health Center works with individuals, families, careers, and communities. So how do you really tailor your program to meet the needs for such a diverse group?
You know, Krystal and I are very fortunate that we're very flexible. And I think we've mentioned this several times, but when we develop a topic or a course, it's geared to a middle of the road general lay audience. Then we have that template laid down. And if we would get asked by a professional group to give a CEU program, we would add in a little bit more research or a little higher level information for that group. If it was a particular social group or civic group, we might use examples differently than we do to the general group. So it's kind of, I don't want to say intuitive, but in a way, we just try to learn about that group that's coming to us. And our general ones, we keep general for everybody, so everybody can relate. But then if we're hired by someone to do a specific group for caregivers, let's say, then we slant it toward them. But the basic information is the same. We really live by a couple of mottos that we have of brain care for all and brain health is for everyone, and we truly believe that. It's not just a tagline that you'll see on our website or on some of our merchandise. It is truly, we believe it's for everyone, and we will tailor our message however we need it to be for a different group as needed. But across the board, we start general and then shift specific if we need to.
Yeah, I think that's basically how I've also been doing it with Cognitive Connections, kind of laying out that general theme. And then based off of whether it's kids, teens, adults, or seniors, you just cater towards their needs and make it more specific to whatever will engage them. So,
Yeah.
what are some unique challenges that caregivers face when it comes to brain health? And how have you guys, especially being part of Virtual Brain Health Center, support them through your program?
Usually when we first come into contact with caregivers, they're reaching out to find resources for their loved one who maybe is suffering from a brain injury or a brain degenerative disease of some kind. And that's a great place to start because that's what they're coming to us for, is for some help. What can they do to help the person that they're caring for? But in the process, we come back to that brain care for all. We want to remind the caregivers that they also need to be aware of their brain health risks because they're under so much stress when they're doing that caregiving role. And I can speak to that from firsthand experience that your brain takes a toll when you're a caregiver. So teaching the caregiver that they also need to think about how they incorporate some of those same concepts they're providing for their loved one into their own life as well is a really crucial component when we're working with caregivers. And sometimes it needs to be separate. So sometimes there needs to be that educational component for the caregiver to take care of their loved one, and then have that other space that's away from their loved one that maybe they can get together and talk with other caregivers, kind of like a support group, but not really a formal, more of a social get together. Let's talk about an idea, but really to stress with them that they need to take care of their brain health so that they can be the best caregiver for their loved one as well.
Yeah, I think that's definitely really important what you just said. Caregivers are definitely prone to a lot of stress during the whole process. And, emotional well-being is one of the five pillars of brain health. So if their emotional well-being and their emotional state is not very regulated, that can essentially take a toll on their brain health. So the fact that you guys are also helping them is really amazing. So what are some of the most rewarding moments that you and your team have seen with the impact of virtual brain health center service on people?
I think one of the things that was the most surprising to us and definitely the most rewarding is when we started, we just aimed to reach out to places in Northeast Ohio. And Krystal has mentioned it grew way beyond our expectations. But I double checked on Eventbrite yesterday, and we have reached people in 109 different countries. And there have been 18,000 plus students who have registered for classes. And if you had told us that 4 years ago, we would have told you you were insane. Because we really just wanted to fill that gap here in Northeast Ohio where we knew seniors were being impacted. And it ended up that we have made a difference in that many countries and that many people. And that's a lot of different age groups as well. So even though we originally thought, oh, this is just seniors, we've learned that that age group has widened tremendously. And really, I think probably mid to late 20s and up is the most of the age groups that we have served. So the fact that we have a platform that has an international reach is certainly one of the things that I'm the most proud of. I think the two places that we do that the best are through the NeuroNook, the monthly book club that Krystal co-hosts with someone else, and also our Brain Awareness Week that's coming up in March. And those are the two areas I think that have the biggest draw for this international reach. And we just like to see people from across the world that can connect and can talk, and that we see that the brain health issues that people are concerned about here in the United States can mirror what somebody has in India or what is going on in Ireland or in South Africa. And it kind of brings everybody together on a topic that is outside of the political realm, or, it's a safe space when we're talking about our own brain health. And it's been really enlightening to see all the people share from all the different parts of the world and support each other in this brain health journey. So again, we couldn't have done this in person. So having the virtual space has been wonderful to be able to do that.
It's absolutely amazing that you guys have reached over 100 countries. That's mind blowing. So, and it's only been, what, like 4 years since you guys started. So that's an
Yeah.
amazing growth. So congratulations with that. So what are some future initiatives that you guys are planning to do at the Virtual Brain Health Center that is essentially going to further improve brain health access and education for all?
Yeah, we're gearing up, as LeAnne mentioned. Our mega event of the year is we follow the Dana Foundation and International Brain Research Organization's Brain Week in March. This will be our 5th year doing it as the Virtual Brain Health Center. So we kind of call that our blowout event where we partner with other organizations. I'm so glad we're teaming up with you to do a conversation about brain health for everyone. But we look at other experts that are topics of interest, like that we've gotten feedback from the community around nutrition. We try to find other people that have some evidence-based or really some science-informed programs that are free and accessible to people, even available in multiple languages. So we really look to find strategic partners all across the world. Luckily, now we've had instructors in multiple countries where we can take a moment and dive into the intricacies of the mind diet, where we can understand the latest neuroscience of how bullying impacts the brain. So we looked at really diverse topics. We lean heavy into being a little more brain nerdy than you would find in our typical events during that week. But then we also balance that out with other brain day events throughout the year. So we do things in May around Mental Health Awareness Month, where we focus more on those brain care skills. So being quiet, going within, having someone guide us through meditation while also telling us a little bit about the science. So we do balance some where there's more education and lecture heavy. And then we do these other events where the goal really is to cultivate or experience some of the brain skills you might not have access to in your immediate community. And you can see if it resonates with you and is something you fold in on part of your day-to-day routine. So that's really where we're up. We're in the middle of deep into planning those big events, but luckily we have a lot of other resources people can find on our website as well.
That's amazing. I'm sure our audience will definitely tune into both of those events, and I'm excited to join you guys during the Brain Health Awareness Week as well. So many people tend to focus on physical health, but brain health is continuously has been overlooked in the past, as you guys mentioned. So what do you see as the biggest barrier to people seeking help for brain health, and how can we really overcome that?
This is a great question, and I have tried to narrow it down to what I think the biggest barrier is, because I know from conversations you've likely had with others, and even LeAnne, is there's a lot of barriers to this conversation. And I think from my experience and what we see is it's just the initial starting point of linking some of the concerns you have or the way you plan your time and your energy throughout your day back to the brain. We have this better idea of, just like you said, with physical health. So if we're physically exhausted, but we don't realize, how cognitively exhausting it can be to have a stressful day and you're trying to manage your emotions and then you're trying to plan what's next and all these demands that you've had of your brain. So I think there's a lot more around that conversation of just bringing general awareness where that the way you're investing your time and your energy and your leisure impacts the brain and the body. But I think for so many, we can clearly understand that physical side. We expect that, but it's bringing in that brain piece, which, much like you said, it brings in emotion. It brings in our thinking skills. It brings in the physical aspects too, but really seeing how they're all interconnected and just starting the conversation on your brain or your brain health, however that may show up for you. But I think that those, what I'd say, are the biggest barriers is recognition first, and then knowing who to talk to, or for yourself, even to advocate of, I'm not sleeping well at night. I'm feeling really groggy. My mood is low, and linking that back to some of the things in brain and your lifestyle. But so many of us are hesitant to start some of those conversations, but realizing there's a lot of support and resources and things we could do today, right now, that could help that. And so we always encourage people, just start the conversation and start to have or be challenged to have the level of awareness of how many things you ask your brain to do for you every day.
Yeah, I think that's definitely great advice because today we live in a very, very fast-paced world. We're constantly just working and working, and most of us just forget to take that rest. And I think, taking that rest, giving your brain the break that's needed, and really, trying to increase awareness about brain health and starting those conversations is really what's going to bring our audience up to, increasing their brain health wellness. And it's also amazing because today, we're seeing an increase of all these brain health organizations that are actually trying to help, improve brain health wellness, increase the advocacy. So I think there's a lot of different institutions and organizations that are available for the people of today to actually be able to help them with their brain health journey. So I think that's amazing. Okay. Okay. So Virtual Brain Health Center has a really strong focus on lifelong learning as a tool for brain health wellness. So, how does continued learning help with cognitive function and brain health, particularly as we age?
So I started researching lifelong learning and older adults in the late 1990s, really before that term lifelong learning got used all the time. Uh, the brick and mortar building that Krystal and I worked at, a senior living facility, had a lot of really innovative lifelong learning programs. And I wanted to provide the best programs I could for my clients. So I did a lot of research on my own and found out how important lifelong learning is for older adults. It also is important for everybody else, but specifically older adults after they retire, they may not always look for those experiences like you had to do when you were working and do continuing education credits or learn new things for your job. So my research really focused on the older adult. And the things that came up again and again were our brain loves to learn new, novel, and complex things. So our brain strives when we learn new things, or maybe we learn about something in a different way. That can kind of be that novel description. And it really loves when things are complex. It doesn't want to be bored. It wants to learn new things. So when we expose our brain to those kinds of things, we actually build brain cells or neurons in different parts of our brain. And what they have found over the years that they've been studying this effect of lifelong learning is that we build up what's called a cognitive reserve. So it's basically a protective factor for our brain so that if we would have a brain damaging disease, injury, like a stroke or a head injury, that we would have some protection built in, kind of a reserve, kind of like you build up your muscles so that if you're laid up in bed for a week, you have more muscle that it doesn't all waste away. Same thing with your brain. If you build up those neurons and the connections between your neurons through this lifelong learning and these new, novel, and complex things, your brain has some built-in protection if you have a stroke, if you get dementia, if you have a head injury. When we do it in class, I like to have the description of picture a big, beautiful maple tree in your front yard full of fall colored leaves. And then picture the Charlie Brown Christmas tree. And cognitive reserve looks like that maple tree. And not having cognitive reserve is the Charlie Brown tree. So if those trees both get hit by lightning, it doesn't damage that maple tree as much as it would that pathetic little Christmas tree because it has more reserve, more branches, more leaves. So that's kind of how you want to picture your brain, as all those different connections between the neurons in your brain look like those branches on that beautiful tree. And you want to keep them vital and connected and alive. And the way you do that is through lifelong learning. And it's even more important after retirement and as we age to expose our brain to those types of situations. And so that's one of the goals of our center, is to give those opportunities and to provide the resources that people can continue to do that on their own. Even when they're not online with us, we give them other options of where they can continue to do that in between.
I think that was a great example with the maple tree and the Charlie Brown tree. I think that's a very easy way to think about how our neural reserve does work. And the idea of maintaining cognitive wellness and cognitive fitness, that's also, again, one of the five pillars of brain health that we as cognitive connections also focus on. So I think that overlap is definitely crucial. So the idea of continuous learning is what's going to keep those connections within our brain continually growing. And that's really crucial for our overall brain health awareness and wellness. So, what is the most important piece of advice that you'd like to share with our listeners about caring for their brain health every day?
I think I'd like to combat a common myth of, we think it's too late, especially as we get older. We tend to think, oh, I'll get around to it or I'm not going to. But the research really shows is it's never too early and it's never too late to start doing something that's better for your brain. And all of us could probably sit here and reflect. I could maybe make a better decision each day. I could eat one more fruit or vegetable, or I could keep hydrated. I should reach out to a friend for my social health. Whatever it is never too late to start. And you're never too early to start again as well. So just to keep that in mind, there's no right or wrong time. And we tend to kind of impose that on ourselves, especially as we age. But there are very practical things you could do today, even from the time you're listening this until the time you go to sleep. If you prioritize sleeping well, that's your one thing for your brain health. But there are always small wins that you can have that are very tangible. And those small steps really are what build up your cognitive reserve and the brain healthy lifestyle to really be robust for yourself. So when you're having those emotional challenges or a stressful day, you have tools and resources within yourself or within your environment that you can lean on. And so there's always something that you can do that's better for your brain. So we challenge you, just find one and focus on one thing a day and build from there.
Yeah, I think what you said is definitely very important advice, and it really resonates with the mission of cognitive connections as well. It's never too early to start or never too late to start as well. That's why, you want to focus on kids, teens, adults, and seniors. So really, whatever age you are, but whoever is listening today, I think taking that one small step is just what's going to start your brain health journey. And lastly, for those who want to dive deeper into brain health and really get involved with the Virtual Brain Health Center, what are resources or programs that you would recommend that they start with?
I would say to visit our website at virtualbrainhealthcenter.com. All the things that we've covered through our conversation, from our events to the podcast library to infographics to blogs, however you choose to consume your information, we have that for you, all clickable on the website, free, accessible, and hope that it can be some way to start with you where you're at on your brain health journey. And if not, you can always email us either through the website or at info@virtualbrainhealthcenter.com. We're happy to give personalized recommendations or resources of where people can get started as well.
That's amazing. I'll definitely link the Virtual Brain Health Center website and their Instagram on the description of this podcast. And I just wanted to say, Dr. Cullers and Ms. Stuver, thank you so much for taking the time today to be on the Cognitive Connections podcast. It was just truly an amazing experience to learn about the Virtual Brain Health Center and really the profound impact that you guys have created together.
Thank you.
Yeah. And to everyone that's listening, thank you so much for listening to the Cognitive Connections podcast. And remember to keep your brain healthy, and see you next time.